And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this special edition episode of the Assembly Call, a special midweek edition episode previewing the upcoming Crossroads Classic game between Indiana and Notre Dame. Hey, there wasn't a game all week long. There's this long break before this much anticipated game. Of course, we're going to come on here, do a special edition episode. Plus, Andy wasn't able to join us on the last episode, and so we weren't able to get his patented IU opponent breakdown, which we will get tonight, which will be very fun. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Ryan, and we'll answer some of your questions all in about the next, 35, 40 minutes, something like that, however long we need to go to cover what we need to cover. I am your host, Jerod Morris. Very excited to be here tonight. And let's kick things right off with the banner moment. Yes, it's not a post-game show, but we'll still start things off how we always do, because something did happen yesterday that frankly makes me think IU might be a small tick closer to their next banner, and it has absolutely nothing to do with Indiana and everything to do with an opponent that has been a thorn in our backside for the past decade. That, of course, is the Wisconsin Badgers, and the news, of course, is that Bo Ryan decided to step down. And, does that really put IU any closer to another banner? Probably not. But when you consider that, pretty much for the past 8-9 years, and maybe even longer than that, every time you see Wisconsin on the schedule, you kind of think that's a loss. And, as someone, obviously we've all been a little bit frustrated by the kind of calls Wisconsin gets at home, and Bo Ryan is kind of fun to throw pictures up of because of his mean, crazy faces. He is, without question, one of the greatest coaches in the history of the Big Ten. And as much as it will be nice, presumably, for Wisconsin to not be as powerful, but maybe we shouldn't underestimate the current interim coach and whoever they may get after that. You can't help but think that the Badgers will have a drop-off losing one of the true legends of the Big Ten. And so all jokes aside, a deferential tip of the cap to Bo Ryan, who has been a joy to watch when his teams are not facing Indiana, just for the kind of discipline that they play with, the lack of turnovers, and just the teamwork and camaraderie that his teams have seemed to have. I'm happy to see him go, and I'm sorry to see him go, which maybe is about the best compliment that you can give to an opposing coach. So that's my opening statement. Andy, what's your bottoms line tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo your thoughts on Bo Ryan. It's definitely a little bittersweet in some regard, because you can't help but be kind of excited about the prospect of him not being there, but you also, you also have to have a great deal of respect for what he's done. I mean, just some of the numbers that I read, here's just a quick blurb. Winningest coach in Wisconsin history, 364 wins over 14 plus seasons, led the Badgers to the NCAA tournament every year of his tenure, entering this year. And so, for 14 seasons. Before Ryan came to Madison, Wisconsin had been to the tournament 7 times in school history. So, won 7 Big Ten titles under him, and his winning percentage in conference play is the best in Big Ten history. So, definitely a lot of respect for not only the results that he produced on the floor, but I think the way he went about doing it, as you mentioned, is definitely something to admire somewhat from afar. Although it was, as you said, wasn't always easy to appreciate that when IU would struggle playing them, but definitely will be missed from a coaching standpoint, and a guy who I think most IU fans had a healthy respect for it, even if they really wanted to beat him. Maybe not quite to Gene Katie levels in terms of animosity and maybe even respect, but I think anybody who's followed college basketball and followed the Big Ten for any period of time should have a pretty good appreciation for what he was able to accomplish there.
And what's the name of the interim coach?
Greg Gard, I think is his name.
Greg Gard.
And it'd been I think I heard assistant for about 20 years under Ryan. So just some interesting stories kind of coming out about this, and theories on the timing and what there is. The one I've heard, at least on a couple different college basketball podcasts, is basically that he wanted Gard to be the coach when he left. Barry Alvarez was not necessarily on board with that. Tony Bennett's name has gotten thrown around quite a bit. And then Gard's father also got diagnosed with cancer and passed away in the fall. So there was some speculation that there really wasn't, that Ryan had thought about retiring closer to the beginning of the season. But with, Gard kind of facing that personal situation.
Andy, we're having a problem with your audio. You may need to get out and come back in. Some problem with the audio, but that's okay. We'll move forward. Let's talk IU-Notre Dame. Well, actually, to kind of finish that story real quick, that Alvarez wasn't on board with it, and so basically the reason why Ryan is retiring now is because Guard will get a chance, and he will have all of Big Ten season to basically state his case. Obviously, if Wisconsin does really, really well, it'll kind of force Alvarez's hand. So Bo Ryan, ever a stubborn man, apparently went out exactly as you would expect Bo Ryan to go out. So again, tip of the cap to Bo Ryan. Before we move on to our IU-Notre Dame preview, just a quick reminder to everybody out there to make sure that you get on our email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe. You will get our post-game emails, which includes Andy's patented analysis, his substitution pattern analysis, plus-minus analysis, plus my thoughts on the game. Sometimes I can be a little bit more candid in the email than maybe I am on the post-game show, but you certainly get my honest thoughts, some advanced stat analysis, and, of course, Will's stat of the night as well. So make sure that you go to assemblycall.com/subscribe, enter your email list, and join the 1,300 plus other IU fans who receive our free IU Hoops email newsletter. All right, well, you are listening to the Assembly Call, and we are going to jump right in now to our IU-Notre Dame preview. This is a game that IU fans have been looking forward to ever since the loss at Duke, because it represents Indiana's final opportunity of the non-conference schedule to get a signature win. I don't know if it would really be a signature win so much as just a decent win for the Hoosiers, which our current non-conference resume is severely lacking. Coming into this game, neither one of these teams is a top 25 team, unlike the other game in the Crossroads Classic, where both Purdue and Butler are top 25 teams. Notre Dame, I think I checked, they're receiving 4 votes in the AP poll. Indiana is not receiving any votes, but both Notre Dame and Indiana are well liked by the computers, as the Hoosiers are currently 24th in KenPom, Notre Dame 21st in KenPom. And as we mentioned, 2 teams that have very similar statistical profiles, extremely good offenses and extremely bad defenses. And perhaps the most interesting note entering the Crossroads Classic is this, to put things into perspective. As bad as Indiana has been defensively, at least according to KenPom defensive efficiency metrics, Indiana is actually the second best defensive team out of the 4 teams in the Crossroads Classic, which seems crazy. But Notre Dame's second in the country in offense, Indiana 4th. And then when you look at the defensive efficiency, Notre Dame is at 126th, Indiana is 107th. So again, 2 teams that are extreme. And the difference there, even though the efficiencies are similar, is that IU likes to play very fast, whereas Notre Dame plays much slower. So it'll be interesting to see how tempo plays into this game. Andy, let me go over to you and get your initial thoughts on what the keys will be in this Indiana-Notre Dame matchup.
Yeah, hopefully hopefully audio is corrected for you. It is an interesting. It is better or is not better.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. It is going to be interesting. I've watched parts of a couple of Notre Dame games just in some free time this week to get a better idea of, what they do, how they do it. As you look through stats, as you mentioned, their second adjusted efficiency, really strong shooting. They shoot over 40% from 3-point range, much like IU, and close to 54% on 2-point range. They don't turn the ball over at all, which is something that when you actually look at the numbers, IU has done fairly well, turning its opponents over. Maybe just, maybe it's contagious, whatever IU seems to have with the ball sometimes, but they've done a pretty good job there. But, Notre Dame really protects the ball well. And I think that's, one of the things that allows them to be so efficient. They get the most out of every possession, and they end up scoring a lot of points per game. Even, when you kind of take tempo out of it, their points per game ends up being pretty high, and that speaks to how efficient they are with the possessions that they do use. So, I think rebounding is going to be an interesting key. They're, at least as of this morning, about 78th in offensive rebounding percentage, and we know IU struggled there at times. And Notre Dame has also done a really good job at preventing offensive rebounds for their opponents, and that's an area that IU's excelled at. So I think the battle of the boards and the who can get second chances, will definitely play a factor. And that's one that, if you kind of look at something that's, say, strength on strength, seems like an area that may tip the game one way or the other.
Yeah, and what'll be interesting about this game is some of the individual matchups. I had the opportunity to talk with Jake Brown of Irish Illustrated on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink, and I'll link that on the episode page and also tweet it out. For anybody who hasn't had a chance to listen to that interview, and he was really saying that he thinks Zach August is going to be the key to this game. August is a guy, obviously a big guy down low. He's 6'10", he's 245, he's a senior. Currently, when you look at KenPom's Player of the Year rankings, he's 10th right now. And, he's not overwhelming with his offensive rating, but he is rebounding the ball well. And he's a guy who, has seemed to step up in some big games, maybe doesn't always come to play in the games against lower-ranked opponents, but has been a guy who has played big in important games. And I want to send this along. Will wasn't able to be here tonight. He's doing some stuff with finals, academics first, which is smart by Will. But he echoed a lot of what Jake was saying. So let me read this from Will, who says, the matchup I will be watching come Saturday will be Thomas Bryant and senior Zach August. Bryant struggled against Duke, going up against Plumlee, 6 points and 0 rebounds. Bryant's going to be challenged as August ranks 33rd in defensive rebounding percentage and 63rd in offensive rebounding percentage. That's in the country. So both numbers very good. The only rank that Bryant has in regards to rebounds is 210th, and that's in offensive rebounds, where he's getting about 11% of the offensive rebounds when he's on the floor. So Thomas is going to need to be extra assertive on the glass to sweep up the rebounds against August. But on the plus side for Bryant, he's first in the nation right now in terms of 2-point field goal percentage. And at the same time, Will wanted to give some props to Max Bielfeldt as well, who's 26th in 2-point percentage. And so both of those guys have been efficient scoring the ball. The question, of course, is going to be, can they continue doing that against size, against strength, when it's experience? Bielfeldt certainly has the strength. He certainly has the experience, but he's a 6'7" guy, 6'8" guy. And, so going up against a guy like August could present challenges. With Thomas, he's clearly got the height. He's clearly got the skills, but we've seen him against, in some tougher matchups, struggle to get positioning from a rebounding perspective, struggle to get entries in the post, struggle to just stay in the flow of the game. And so that to me is, and it's why Thomas having a good game last game in Indiana's last time out against McNeese was so important to get him feeling good, because I really think if he comes out and struggles mightily, and August just has a decent game, that's the kind of matchup that could tip the scales in Notre Dame's favor. But if Thomas comes ready to play, ready to live up to that preseason billing, and his teammates are finding him, especially early, and he builds some positive momentum, I think that's going to be huge for Indiana in terms of not just staying in the game, but winning the game. Andy, any other individual matchups that jump out to you that could swing this game one way or the other?
Well, I think the August one is definitely one that I see as well. As you mentioned on Podcast on the Brink, I think there's the definite possibility that Yogi and Demetrius Jackson, which should be a great matchup, kind of cancel each other out. And so that is, that's definitely one to watch. But as you look at Bryant and watching Notre Dame play a little bit, they really do a lot through August. Whether that's in the post, they do a little bit of ball screen action with him, particularly at the end of the shot clock. And he's a guy who's really good at slipping to the basket, and I think that's an area where if IU tries to overplay and trap off of that, the defensive rotation is going to get really important quickly there. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them do, maybe more ball screens with him, given how much trouble Bryant's had with those over the course of his short IU career. And even when August is in the post, he's a really good passer, was able to find the games that I watched, was able to find other guys. So his usage rate, when you look at his advanced stats, is really high, and it speaks to how much they play through him and rely on him. So I think that's definitely one to watch. Bryant has to make him work. By the same token, in either of those matchups, foul trouble could really loom large. So if Bryant's able to, get a foul or two on August, that really changes the complexion of the game, because Notre Dame doesn't have anybody who they can readily sub for him that's going to give even, close to his production. So that's definitely a big one for me. when you look, because I think there's not a great matchup. I think you'll see some, Bielfeldt potentially try to play him as well, but it's going to be a really good challenge for Bryant and a chance to see how far he's come over these last couple of weeks.
And obviously, two guys are going to have to play big. We've talked about this before this season. We've talked about it, for every big game that Indiana has had, is that it certainly seemed like last year when James Blackman Jr. and Troy Williams came to play, this team was ready to compete against better opponents. And unfortunately, that didn't happen consistently on the road. And it really needs to. Troy was named, CBS College Basketball Player of the Week last week, in large part because he found his attacking mentality on the glass again, which we need. Perhaps the voters of that award overlooked the 9 turnovers that Troy had, and clearly Indiana needs to reduce those. Notre Dame is not a team that turns the ball over. They are also not a team that turns opponents over. And so, this is going to be a game where if Indiana's turning it over, it's probably a lot of the unforced variety, and unfortunately Indiana is prone to those. And so I think Troy especially, it's perhaps wishful thinking to hope for him to not be initiating too much of the offense in the half court, which just hasn't been as successful this year as it seemed to be last year. I think we'd all like to see Troy work in the baseline a little bit more. But then James Blackman Jr., Notre Dame can score. We know Indiana's going to have to score with them. And I think a big game from James Blackman Jr., where he's shooting well, picking his spots well, creating, is going to be really important for Indiana as well. Andy, what other keys do you see for Indiana? I mean, and how important is a guy like Robert Johnson in this game, who apparently we found out this week is dealing with some kind of injury issue, maybe a hamstring, we're not quite sure, but Tom Crean said he's not even close to 100%, although we haven't really heard about anything about that before this week.
Yeah, it's interesting trying to figure out matchups. I know you guys talked a little bit about this on Podcast on the Brink. I mean, Notre Dame plays, Demetrius Jackson's pretty short. I think he's about 6'1". But then, Vasturia, VJ Beecham, and Bonzi Colson are all in the 6'5", 6'7", 6'8" range. And so I think, it's a little bit hard to figure out matchups on both sides. One is who for Notre Dame guards Troy Williams. That seems like Beecham is the guy who's got the best chance to really keep up with him. He's 6'8", really long arms. Colson's just not quite as agile and able to probably stay with him, even though he could, body him a little bit. But then on the other end, you got to kind of figure out, well, what's IU going to do? Troy seems to be the best matchup for Colson because he's going to play inside a little bit more. He's got not somebody who's really going to step out and shoot threes, whereas Beecham, even though he's 6'8", has taken about 2/3 of his shots from three-point range and, is going to kind of live out there. So you could probably put a Robert Johnson on him. Where that starts to get tricky is, I think Yogi on Demetrius Jackson seems like the logical choice there. But Vasturia is a guy who can also really put the ball on the floor and get to the basket and kick out. I mean, a lot of what Notre Dame does is drive and kick. They play large parts of possessions with everybody at the foul line or higher to just open up the lane for drives, open up the lane for cuts. And that's the kind of thing that scares me about guys like Troy and James defensively is they just get caught watching the ball. They're going to give up a lot of easy baskets on guys cutting to the rim because everybody on Notre Dame does a nice job of that, and they're really active on the offensive end in terms of moving around. So I think there's a lot of challenges defensively to figure out who matches up with who, and I think or whoever Colson is forced to guard could present a mismatch. I think you've got a little bit of the same thing on the other end because you've really got to try to keep a couple of these guys out of the lane, which is, as we know, has been a challenge. And Vasturia, even though it doesn't necessarily, look like he can get to the rim as easily as he seems to, you watch these games and he's consistently getting there. So I think there's some definitely some challenges there. I think Troy and James, just attentiveness on defense and understanding what's going on is going to be key. And again, some of these rotations are going to be big because Notre Dame really wants to space you out. Overhelping is, has been said so often this year is a big issue for IU, and Notre Dame's got multiple guys that can really hit threes well. So definitely going to be a game to challenge IU defensively, which most fans like me, the thought of this team being challenged defensively is a little scary at this point in the grand scheme of things.
So, Andy, obviously we don't start going on record with picks until our Big Ten Pick'em Challenge begins when Big Ten season starts, and that is coming. Will and I were actually going over the process recently, and it's going to be much simpler this year, so stay tuned for that. But what's your feeling about this game? I mean, is this a game where you expect Indiana to come out and play well? Do you expect an Indiana victory? What's just, having seen Indiana play, what you know of Notre Dame, what's your gut feeling?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that probably is looming in all of our heads that I wanted to touch on quickly is whether this feels like a must-win game for IU. I think everybody's certainly circled it since the Duke game, uh, and I try to look at it a little bit more from a big picture standpoint, thinking ahead a little bit to bracketology and those kinds of things. I mean, at this point, IU had, at least when I looked yesterday, they've got 2 top 100 wins, but both of those are against teams in the 90s. I think at IPFW and Morehead State. I don't know how that changed, if that changed much at all after yesterday. So there's no notable non-conference wins. There's no notable road or neutral wins to date. So this is really the last chance for it. And that's something we all knew. When you look past that, though, the early Big Ten schedule for IU is something that we talked about before. I feel like we're having a lot of the same conversations as we did a couple months ago, but now in a completely different light. So I think we said before, wow, it's great. The Big Ten schedule gets off to a relatively easy start, and this team could really, jump out to a good start. And that's true, and that's still true. But the problem is I'm just going to run down, I don't know how many games this is, but early Big Ten schedule, you got at Rutgers, at Nebraska, not tournament teams. You have Wisconsin at home, who's really struggling now with the coaching change. While systematically, I don't think anything will change. You don't really know how they'll react. They haven't played well. They've got a couple bad losses. Tournament started today. They'd be on the outside looking in, as would IU probably. Ohio State, who has struggled, just got back to 500 tonight, but is probably going to get run off the court against Kentucky over the weekend. So they've been up and down. They're a bubble team probably at best. At Minnesota, they're not making it. Illinois, they haven't looked good. Northwestern has one loss but hasn't really played anybody. At Wisconsin, Minnesota, and then at Michigan on February 2nd. So in theory, you might not play another tournament caliber team until February 2nd, and it's not even as if Michigan has looked all that good. So you could go an awful long time where you don't have a chance to pick up a great win, but you do have a chance to pick up some at least potentially questionable losses as you get started. So I think that that makes this game that much bigger, that they can kind of get one under their belt before the pressure of, hey, we got to rack up wins, we got to beat good teams, starts to become really important. So, things ramp up toward the end of the Big Ten season, obviously, but again, as we've talked about, getting a lot of those single plays against some of the better teams in the league, now it doesn't seem quite as great as it did at the beginning of the year because, they need chances at those wins for seeding or to get in and all that kind of thing. So all that being said, with all that said as backdrop, I think IU can win this game. I think a big factor could be depth. Notre Dame is not very deep. They play their starting lineup. Last time I looked on Pomeroy, about 40% of the time, where there's some lineup tracking things there over the past X number of games. I think they play their starters a lot. They really have, those guys are the 5 guys they can count on. They'll rotate in. They've got a backup point guard who will play. Doesn't have a lot of experience. Doesn't shoot a lot. And Matt Farrell. You've got Matt Ryan, who's a 6'8" freshman. He's taken 34 of his 38 shots from 3, so he's more of the, kind of stretch 4 type guy that they have. So he helps space the floor, but doesn't play a ton. And then, they have this Austin Torres guy who's a potential sub for August if he gets in foul trouble, but not a guy who plays a lot of minutes. So while, as you said, Notre Dame really doesn't foul, they don't put people on the line. If somehow IU can be aggressive enough to change that, I think IU's depth, where you can go to the bench and bring in a Colin Hartman and a Zeisloft, and Anunoby played well in the last game, and Bielefeld, I think that has a chance to become a factor, and I think that's definitely, if you're looking for an area where IU has a wide advantage, that's it. Notre Dame has not been great defensively. They play a little bit of zone as well. It's maybe not quite on the level of the IU zone, but it isn't a lot better. I watched the Stony Brook game, and they got a lot of wide open shots there. So I think that's positive. I think IU can score. Really just have to take care of the ball. It sounds simple, sounds like something we've talked about so many times before, but the shots are going to be there if they take care of the ball. So I think, again, depth and hopefully some solid offense in terms of turnovers will be good, and hopefully IU can do enough defensively to slow Notre Dame down. But it will most certainly be a high-scoring game. That is for certain.
All right, well, we have a special guest who has just joined us here on the Assembly Call, and we are going to get some hot sports opinions from him here in a moment. But I do want to offer up a quick reminder that if you need to do any last-minute Christmas shopping for the IU fan in your life, go to assemblycall.com/Christmas, because for the second year in a row, I've scoured the web for the best IU gifts I could find, and I've compiled 53 of them. Last year it was 40, I think. This year it's 53 in honor of the 53 Hoosiers. There's tons and tons of cool gifts there, like the Calbert Chaney starting lineup, which you can see in my backdrop over there. But go there. Plus, a lot of those links are affiliate links, and what that means is if you click on them and buy, it actually helps support the show, which we really appreciate. It helps us cover the cost of the chat, helps us cover Ryan's increasingly exorbitant salary. And so we do really appreciate that. And there are other ways to support the show, too. You can go to assemblycall.com/support. We are fully listener supported, and we really, really, really appreciate all of you who have already generously donated and used our affiliate links to support what we do. So thank you once again. It's assemblycall.com/Christmas for the Christmas gifts, and then assemblycall.com/support to see the many different options that you have for supporting the show. All right, well, we're rolling on this episode of the Assembly Call. We just got done previewing IU-Notre Dame, but now we must bring in Ryan Phillips and give him the floor to mourn the loss of Bo Ryan. Well, Coach Bo Ryan. I don't want to be too dramatic there.
Yeah, he's not dead. He's still alive, as far as we know. I mean, last time I checked, which was last night. So, no, I mean, I think that Bo Ryan is one of those guys that you hate to face him and you hate everything about him when your team is playing him, but you have to look at him and be like, tip your cap to him. He's one of those foes that after it's all done, you have to sort of respect and wish well as they move on. I remember I was the last game that Gene Cady coached at Assembly Hall, and he got a standing ovation from the crowd. I think it's that sort of moment, because there's no denying what Bo Ryan has done over the last 14 and I guess almost a half years at Wisconsin. The guy never he took over at a school that is not a basketball school. I think Wisconsin has been solid for so long that people think, this was a great basketball school and he just kind of kept it rolling. No, that's not the case at all. Dick Bennett had some success there, but it was not what it is now. And I mean, in each of his seasons, they finished no worse than fourth in the Big Ten. That is simply astonishing when you look at how good the Big Ten has been in that time. He won the conference title 4 times, won the tournament title 3 times. Again, this is not a basketball school, and Wisconsin that lasted, that was stunningly effective. I think last year was his best team, and it's really sad that he didn't get to win that title and retire with a win, though he did beat Kentucky to keep them undefeated, so I will always appreciate him for that. And I was at that game, and Bo, thank you. Keep them from going undefeated, and then he lost in the title game to Duke, which I'll always hold against him as well. But I think it's sad for college basketball. I think he is just one of those guys who is a phenomenal head coach. And on Rumors and Rants today, we had Zach Rostall, who's at Wisconsin right now, wrote a really good piece about how Greg Gard has just enormous shoes to fill, and it will be probably impossible for him. But he was a different guy. He went by his own sort of rules. And he defied convention in a lot of ways, and I mean, we can get into his offense and things like that made them so hard to prepare for in the system. But I think that all basketball fans, all fans of college basketball, should be a little sad. I'm happy that we don't have to face him anymore, because he's just a phenomenal coach, and you have to respect what he built at Wisconsin. Out of he did it his own way, and I know a lot of people in Milwaukee, where I lived for a while, are Marquette alums and can't stand him. And one of them texted me today that Bo Ryan had stepped down just in time to steal Christmas. But it's but yeah, I was dying laughing for 10 minutes. But at the same time, while we may feel that way, he's definitely somebody who you have to respect and who had a phenomenal career.
All right, so we got a few questions. Let's get to these questions and let's answer these. So our buddy Brian asked a really good question. I want to get both your guys' thoughts on this. And it deals with Indiana's defensive issues, which, seems like for 2 years we've been trying to find the key to fixing this defense. So here's Brian's question. Does fast-paced offense lead to weak defense? Does it get players thinking offense before defense? Are the number of possessions more important? Does this emphasis on pace lead to issues elsewhere, or can a team be good at both? And Ryan, someone asked you on Twitter earlier today, where they kind of compared Crean and Mike D'Antoni, with the suggestion being just, all we care about is offense. We don't even care about defense. So what do you think? Can you play at this fast pace and still be really good on the defensive end, or has the way that Indiana has chosen to play simply made it so that defense is going to be an issue?
Well, I think that basketball has kind of gone in the way of looking at the analytical stats, and I think one of them is, points per possession has become a huge deal. So you can't look at points per game, which is how still traditionally you're judged defensively. You have to look at points per possession, and that's where you have to cut down. So you can score 90 points a game, and you can give up, let's say, more than you would have 10 years ago. 70 points 10 years ago was a huge deal. If you gave up that much, what's your defense doing? Now that can actually be a solid defensive game if you look at the points per possession and you look at the advanced metrics. Indiana's not doing that. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is the game has changed to a more up-tempo, more scoring kind of mode, and with the way they're calling fouls and things now, I think more teams are moving towards more offense. The problem is that IU just does not have stoppers right now. And when you look at Crean's history, and I mentioned this on Twitter today, he had some really good defensive teams on Marquette. Now maybe that was out of necessity because he played in the Big Ten or Big East for some of those years. And maybe you needed strong defensive guards, which is where most of his defense came from. Was very strong on-ball defense. It might be the kids he's recruiting. It might be a change in philosophy. I don't know. But if you look at it, IU hasn't really had a defensive stopper other than Victor Oladipo. Christian Watford went through a phase where he was doing some really good defensive stuff. He was guarding, 4 positions on the floor, sometimes 5, as many as 5. But we really haven't had a defensive stopper. I thought Remy Abel had the ability to be that guy, but he didn't stay long enough to really develop into that guy. He was just sort of a strong, athletic guard who could have been molded into that, but we just haven't seen that. And I don't know if it's what he's teaching. We're not in practice, so I can't really answer that. But it's not like this guy has never coached defense before, and it's not like he's never had good defensive teams. It's something, maybe it's systemic. I don't know. But whatever they're doing, they're getting guys who are better offensive players than they are defensive players, and you're missing out on a lot of the elements that you need to be a good defensive squad, and that's been happening for a few years. 2 years ago, they had a very good defensive team and a terrible offensive team, but for the most part, it has been a highly productive offense and a defense that leaves much to be desired.
Andy, what do you think? And let me preface your answer simply by saying, Indiana obviously plays at a fast pace. Their average possession length, is somewhere right around 15.8, I think. Let me get the exact number. 15.4, which is 35th in the country. You look at Notre Dame, they're second in the country in offense. Their average possession length is 19 point something. Virginia obviously is number 1, the only team in the country that is in the top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Their average possession length is 318th in the country. Purdue is actually playing at a decently fast pace this year. They're actually 64th in terms of efficiency, but there are clearly some teams out there that have good, powerful offenses. Like Notre Dame, and Virginia has gotten much better on offense as a program, that don't play at that fast pace. And yet those teams, outside of Notre Dame, but certainly Virginia and Purdue play outstanding defense. So what do you think? Does the pace that IU's playing, is that just something that we have to settle with, or is that just more of an excuse?
To me, it feels a little bit like more of an excuse. When you look kind of sorted, the adjusted tempo numbers on, Pomeroy to look at. So I use 82nd in adjusted tempo out of 345 teams. So, you've got that, but you've got some teams in here. North Carolina, they're 38th in defensive efficiency. They play a little bit faster. Oklahoma's third in defensive efficiency, and they're ranked 42nd in adjusted tempo. I mean, I think I think to pass it off as just the pace of play it is something that I don't want to say is lazy, but I think that's just an easy excuse. The fundamentals of what you want to do defensively don't change because you play faster. It forces you to recognize things more quickly as you do that, but you've also got, nothing requires the other team to play at your pace. As we've seen over the years, IU's been slowed down by teams that wanted to do their own, wanted to slow up the game and kind of grind it out. And so, in those situations, the pace that you're playing at really doesn't have anything to do with it. So I don't read too much into it. I do think there's a little bit of, and I think this has come up before, I think Crean's even said this, that, some of these guys are deriving their confidence, their energy from whether or not they're scoring. And we've talked a number of times that it needs to be the other way around, that, to kind of be energized by playing good defense, which they have seemed to embrace in small pockets of time over the course of the season, but just haven't really been able to do consistently.
Ryan, question for you. This comes from Candy Stripes in our chat. And he says, and I've noticed this too, there are certain times, obviously, the team will play fast and really going up and down. And there are times when things start to slow down. He mentions Yogi sometimes will seem to take the ball down and it kind of stalls out and he's dribbling around, like he's waiting or kind of running the clock. And it seems like it kind of takes us a while to get into a set and we'll run off 15, 20 seconds. And it's just such a stark contrast from what we typically see on offense. Is that, something strategic where the team's trying to slow it down, get into a set? Is it, and what Candy Stripes mentions is that sometimes it just looks like confusion, like the players don't quite know what to do. Is that something on Yogi or on Crean where, there's just no organization out there and it takes a while to get going? Like, what do you notice about some of those times in the half court where we seem kind of to get outside of what we normally do?
Well, what I think is going on in a lot of those is if you're running a play and a guy sees an opening, he's going to take it, but if that opening closes and he has to pull it back out or dribble all the way through, it throws off everybody else because you're not expecting that. You run to where you're supposed to be on the floor and then realize the ball's not where it's supposed to be in that specific set. So I think that happens a lot because I think that Crean has this green light philosophy with guys where, hey, if you see an opening, go. Get to the hoop, get fouled, do something. But if guys go and then that's the problem with it, is if guys go and the door closes, you've got to pull it back out and start all over, and guys, might not be where they're supposed to be on the floor to restart the set or something like that, so it's confusion. You see guys pointing, things like that. That happens, and so that's part of the green light philosophy he sort of has. I mean, he's basically James Blackman Jr. can shoot whenever he wants. Yogi can shoot whenever he wants. I'm sure they also have you can drive whenever you want, get to the hoop. If you see an opening, go. And in some ways, that's good because guys are looking to accomplish something as opposed to just running a play endlessly. But at the same time, it throws everybody else off. I mean, stuff like that happen when you're not hardwired into a system like that's one of the things why people prefer the motion offense, which we don't run, is because you can always improvise off of something. It's more of a mentality than a specific play. And you always know where to go next and things like that. So, I mean, again, if you're in a specific set and a guy goes to the hoop, I mean, you see Yogi charge to the hoop a lot and then dribble under and dribble out and try and pull it out and reset. That can throw off the offense and that can throw off the timing. And I'm sure it looks like confusion, and I'm sure there is some confusion until they get where they're supposed to be and restart. But that's gonna happen when you run the kind of system we do. I mean, I'm not here to debate the merits of the system. I'm just being the messenger. So it's not something that I grew up doing when I was playing, but it's what the system is, and the guys work within it. And honestly, clearly, offense isn't our problem, so I don't really have that big a problem with it. I think that at times we do stall out and take too long on offense, but that has definitely gotten better this year. I've seen more, successful offense this year than, say, last year. We'd run into a lot of problems, especially late in games.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. Our offense is clearly very good. It's great. It's elite. isn't as good as we think it is, because I mean our offense is really good against these sub 100, sub 200, sub 300 teams, and clearly we went on the road at Duke and scoring wasn't the problem. But there were certainly games last year, especially again we get back to this tough road games against good teams, where the other teams get physical, they put the clamps down, and we don't score very well. And it's not like we compensate in those games with the defense stepping up. And so I do think our offense is good. But as good as it is, as pretty as it looks, as well as we shoot, I still struggle a little bit to call it elite, just because I don't trust it going on the road in a tough environment. I don't trust James Blackman yet to consistently, get good shots and make good shots on the road. I don't trust Troy's decision making. I think Yogi is a guy that we can, for the most part, trust. But I wonder, am I being too harsh, or is there something there? Because we've seen that happen to this team in the past.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's harsh at all. I just think that it's so hard to judge from last year. I mean, things haven't changed that much this year as far as being more multi-dimensional. But last year we were so one-dimensional that it's hard to judge. I mean, it's easy to guard a team that can only shoot. It's. And then when you have guys like Blackman, who they overplayed on the perimeter, and he gets to the hoop, he was such a bad finisher last year that it's pointless for him to try and get to the hoop. This year, I think we do have more inside game with Bielfeldt and Bryant, and hopefully in 2 months, Bryant will be more of what we were hoping, kind of a monster on the inside. By the time we get through that easy, as Andy mentioned, that easier Big Ten slate to start things, maybe he'll be able to be more involved as a true low post, hammer down there. But Bielfeldt has shown that he can handle himself down there pretty well, and so we're not as one-dimensional. I think that's what gives me hope that we'll be better at that this year. Is you don't have to work as hard for possessions when you can just dump it in and have a guy go to work. I mean, that's why when you see in the NCAA tournament, something like, if you look back, 99% of teams who have won the NCAA tournament had at least a serviceable big man who could catch the ball and turn around and lay it in. Why? Because those are easy baskets. You don't have to work as hard for those baskets. You don't have to run a gigantic, long, drawn-out set against a great defense to get those points. You just throw it down, let the guy go to work, get fouled, get the bucket. And it's easier for you as a team to run up those points. It also helps on the defensive end, as we've said for 2 years now. Size on the defensive end helps, and it makes things easier. Has that really shown up for IU this year? It's debatable, but I think that just the philosophy of if you have size, it makes the game easier on both ends is true, and I think that will help in the Big Ten this year when you're against a Michigan State who is just a tough, rough, bruising team. If you can just, instead of having to run a full set against a super disciplined defense, if you can just throw it down in the post, get a foul, get a bucket, 70% of the time, you're going to be better off. And I think that will help when we approach those games.
Excellent point. All right, so let's get ready for last call, do some final thoughts. One quick reminder before we do that, go to assemblycall.com/subscribe, get on the email list, make sure that you never miss a post-game email, and also it will help you make sure that you never miss our special edition episodes like these, because we announce it there to our email list first, so you'll make sure that you get those announcements. All right, last call time. Andy, we will go to you first.
Really just looking forward to the game on Saturday. I think both games should be really good. Purdue and Butler should be entertaining as well. And I think the IU-Notre Dame game, like I said, is almost assured to be high scoring. I feel that's something like people say about NFL games, that this is definitely going to be a shootout, and then it ends up being like 17-13. But I don't think this one's going to end up being played in the 50s or 60s by any means. So it should be an entertaining game and a really big opportunity for IU, not only from a resume standpoint, but also I think just to be able to, gain some confidence against a good team, and hopefully play some solid defense against a good team that actually will maybe mean a little bit more to fans if they're able to play well. Because I think even in spurts when they've played well defensively against the Morehead States and whoever else they played recently of the world, I don't know that anybody has felt better about that. I think showing some flashes of good defense against Notre Dame would help to really calm some of those fears, and I think a failure to do so would stoke the flames of those fears. So I think it's just a really big game. Again, I hesitate to say must win, but I think there are a lot of components of this that do make it a must win, and I'll be interested to see how the team shows up and plays. But again, I think rebounding is going to be key. How IU is able to use its depth and hopefully get Notre Dame into a little bit of foul trouble and just play up. If they can enforce that pace on them, I think that exaggerates some of the depth issues as well. I think those are at least a couple things I'll be looking at. And otherwise, just looking forward to enjoying a good game. I think the Yogi-Demetrius-Jackson matchup, which we touched on briefly, is going to be a really good one because Jackson's really good. He's a good three-point shooter. He's got a really nice mid-range game and looks to get to the rim. And again, some of that driving kick. So I think both guys have some similarities in terms of what they're able to do and how much they mean to their teams offensively. So that should be, if you're looking for an individual matchup, should be a really good one. And otherwise, hopefully the scoreboard doesn't burst into flames from all the work it's seems likely to get. But just looking forward to a really good game and hopefully an IU win.
Ryan, last call.
I think I agree with Andy. I'm just looking forward to it because it should be fun basketball, sort of like IU Maryland last year was fun up-tempo basketball. I mean, that's always fun to watch. It's hard to watch for purists sometimes because you want more defense, but I will admit that you get kind of carried away with it, watching that kind of up-tempo game. I agree. I think that Yogi and Demetrius Jackson is the matchup to watch, but I also think that Thomas Bryant needs to have a big game. I think that this could be the chance for him to have a coming out party, and sort of show his stuff because we're going to need a post presence heading into Big Ten play, and I think this is his last chance to show that, he can do it against these good teams and really get it done. And I think he will look at that as a challenge, just knowing his personality against some established post players. And Yogi. I mean, it's interesting. I would not be shocked if Yogi drops 30 in this game. I would also not be shocked if IU gives up 90. So it's we don't know how it's going to turn out. It's a game I think they need, and it's a game I know they want. So hopefully they go out and get it.
By the way, something was just posted in our chat. We are running the chat here during the special edition episode that is absolutely hilarious. I can't describe it, but I will just say it as a plug to make sure that you get in the chat because it's really getting very entertaining for our future games. Make sure you get in there. It runs right alongside the post-game show at assemblycall.com/live, but it's funny. Thank you for posting that, Chronic. All right, so my final thought, last call here. This Notre Dame game seems to be the game where we can really analyze how we are going to do against the Big Ten, based on the matchups and the fact that there are many teams in the Big Ten that can be likened to Notre Dame. This truly is a measuring stick, in my opinion. That is not my thought. That is from Candy Stripes in our chat, and I agree wholeheartedly. It is put up or shut up time for Indiana. This is a team that came into the season with a lot of expectations. Those expectations went by the wayside in Maui. They certainly went by the wayside against Duke. The Hoosiers have rebounded with 3 victories over not great competition these last 3 games, and we can look ahead and look at how easy the schedule is with another game against Savannah State, and then the first 7-8 games of the Big Ten season look pretty inviting, but none of that is going to matter, or it's going to matter a lot less if we don't win this game. This is a really, really important game for Indiana to go away from Assembly Hall against a solid team and get a W. It's a game that Yogi needs to step up and lead. It's a game where Troy Williams needs to play like college basketball's player of the week. He's got to attack the glass like he did. He's got to be smarter with the basketball, and he's got to make the kind of game-changing plays that we know that he can make. And frankly, James Blackman Jr. cannot have one of his away from Assembly Hall against a good team no-shows. He's got to come and put up his 15, 16 points and play defense like we saw him play against Northwestern in the Big Ten tournament last year. That's the James Blackman Jr. that we need. And I think more than anything, Thomas Bryant needs to come up and play like we know Thomas Bryant can play. No, he doesn't have the experience. No, he doesn't have the bulk against Zach August. And Zach August is going to get some points on him. He's going to get his. But Thomas has to fight and play with that lion-like fire that he has to keep Indiana going, to make sure that Indiana has a presence down low. And none of what I've just said is at all impossible or at all difficult for this Indiana team to do. It's just time to start doing it. because, Tom Crean has talked about how it's still early. Well, the season's going to get late real quickly if Indiana loses this game, because it'll mean that there is no margin for error come Big Ten season. And so the Hoosiers need to win this game, add a solid victory to the resume come NCAA tournament selection time. And the thing is, there's no reason not to. This is a game Indiana should win. As the week has gone on, I've started to feel more confident than Indiana will. It's put up or shut up time for the Hoosiers. 2 o'clock Eastern time. The game is on ESPN2. Let's go get the win. We need it. Let's go do it, boys. All right. Thank you all very much for watching us live. We appreciate it. Thank you all very much for listening on the podcast. We always appreciate you too. We will be here live right after IU-Notre Dame on Saturday. I'll be live at halftime with the halftime show. We hope that you will join us. Until then, have a great rest of the week. Don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/Christmas if you need any last-minute Christmas gifts for the IU fan in your life. And we will talk to you all this weekend. See you, everybody.